Sorry, it's a multi-factor thing. Real. But I'm going to just jump in just because of time. So we're going to move past, hopefully you can see my screen there. We're going to move past the review slides. So you can take a look at those afterwards, and I'll post that to the Slack channel. And let's just jump in. And, and again, I didn't, because of today, I just didn't have a chance to really put as much polish on some of this stuff. So I might send you a slightly different version when I do send it out, but all the content's in here. All right, so we're going to look at pronouns. We're going to start with personal pronouns. There's 3 personal pronouns, and maybe first we just need to say, okay, what is a personal pronoun? So a personal pronoun is a word that refers back to a noun or a substantive. Okay, a substantive can be anything that stands in the place of a noun. Okay, it could be a participle. We'll see. It could be an infinitive, like a verb, like to go is better. To go there functions as a substantive, so a noun or a substantive. So a pronoun, personal pronoun has as its antecedent, that's the thing it refers to, right? It has as its antecedent a noun or a substantive, okay? So for personal pronouns, there's the first person, again, and just as we have in English, we have a difference between a singular and a plural, right? So in English, I and we, and then in Greek, first person singular, ego, and first person plural, he mes, right? So second person, su, and second person singular, and then second person plural, who mes, okay?
Is that the silent or the smooth breathing mark thing again?
That should be the rough breathing mark. And it is, yeah. So when it's that apostrophe looking thing is flipped the other way, then that's the smooth breathing mark. So that would be pronounced umes, which there is no word in Greek like that. When you see it reversed that way, it's humes. Okay. Then third person singular, autos and autoi. Okay. So he, she, it, or they. All right. All right. So as I mentioned, a pronoun is anything that takes the place of its antecedent. Right. So when you're translating and you see a pronoun and you say, I think it's a personal pronoun, then you're going to look for the antecedent. What does it refer to? Very famous verse, of course, you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. He is the pronoun, and Jesus is the antecedent. Make sense, everyone?
Is it the same rule in English where if a new sentence starts with a pronoun, it's still referring to the prior antecedent?
Typically, but there is in poetry, what you call, just for your information, don't need to know this, but it's called delayed explicitation. It's a technique where you use the pronoun first, and then, of course, people are on the edge of their seat wondering, well, who is he? You keep talking about him and he, and then that's like I believe the anaphoric reference. So that's unusual, but occasionally it's not strictly speaking always an antecedent. Sometimes there's a cataphoric, they call it, reference, where the noun comes later. The reference comes later. In fact, actually, I'll put a note in there about this because I wanted to actually call this the referent rather than the antecedent, because occasionally we do that too, right? You know, when he goes to the beach, my dad always brings his lawn chair. He isn't really an antecedent because it comes before my dad, right? Or dad. See what I mean? When my dad goes to the beach, he always brings his lawn chair. Now he has an antecedent and it's dad. Make sense? All right.
Is it Proverbs, Song of Solomon that does that?
All the poetic literature. Yeah, that's actually a good question. I can't say that categorically, but that's a common literary technique in the Hebrew Bible and in all literature, all poetry. Okay, personal pronoun usage. So pronouns do agree, and here's actually where English intuition does give you some help, right? So if you're talking about a male, I'm talking about Tommy and I say he is going to the store. I'm talking about praise and I say she is going to the store. You can see that the pronoun has gender, right? He, she. That's not always the case, right? So first common singular, first common plural, I, we, first common, second common singular, second common plural, you, or you all, that there's no gender in English. But in the third person, we have gender in English, okay? And this is actually where Greek and English, fascinatingly, have some correspondence in that regard. You can see that there is both gender and there's also case, and then and we see this is also true about English, right? So when we talk about the subject of a sentence, we say we're using a male pronoun, we would say he. If we're talking about the object of the sentence, then we would use the word him. And sometimes we can even use both in the same sentence if we know what the antecedents are, right? So he hit him, right? So he is declined differently from him. And so that's one area of the English language where we still see that sort of inflection. And that's unusual otherwise in English. So we have number, which would be singular versus plural, remember? We have gender, male, female, or in Greek, neuter. And then we also have case. So this is where Greek is different from English. So largely, not completely, but when we see relative pronouns, you're going to see that there's, even in English, there are some differences. So like who, whom, right? So whom is a relative pronoun for nouns that are objects or in the accusative English. This is I want to know who is going to the store, or you actually should say I want to know the person for whom we are going to be offering this gift. So in that last example, whom is an object of a preposition. And you can see in English, there's some inflection there as well. Let's just keep going because I think it becomes clearer through examples. Personal pronoun usage, you can see, I don't know what's going on here with this slide. I think when I saved it as a PDF, it just bombed out on me. But the first example, Jesus, he will save her people, would not agree in gender, right? If that's what it said. Jesus, he will not save their people. That wouldn't agree in gender, would it? Oh, sorry, in number. Jesus, he will not save. Oh, not sure what the incorrect English would be in there. Whom?
Whom people?
Him people. Him people wouldn't work, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Save him people.
So that's just a little bit on personal pronouns, and then we'll look at examples to clarify it. So looking at the first person personal pronoun, in the singular we have ego, of course, I, and actually we can all together start to say ego, ego. And then first person plural, hemes, all together, hemes, excuse me. Genitive altogether, mu, and that's the singular. And then the plural is hemon. Okay. First person dative, which would be to or for me, right? Moi. So everybody together, moi, moi. Okay. And then in the plural, it would be hemin. And that would be to or for us. Okay. First person singular accusative, personal pronoun, meaning me, would be me, me. And then that's the first person personal pronoun accusative in the plural would be hemas, hemas, hemas. Okay. So let's read them down the columns. Ego, mu, moi, me, hemes, hemon, hemin, hemas. Okay. All right, good.
So it's elementary, but the rough breathing mark is an H sound, right?
That's right. Mhm.
I'm just,
No, we're here, like, so anything that you don't remember, just bring it up. And, part of this is remedial. We're going to review some of the things.
I'm just doing repetition to get it back in my head.
Repetition is what you need with language. And then I'll mention that there are occasional forms where you'll see an epsilon that will attach to the beginning of the personal pronouns. And those typically are for stress, emphasis, or contrast. So you're adding an additional syllable, so it has the effect of slowing the cadence of the speech and oftentimes produces emphasis. Also, most of the time, you'll notice that pronouns that are in the first person, like the genitive singular and the genitive dative, are enclitic. Enclitic means that they don't have an accent, right? And they actually kind of are read with the word that comes before them, but they don't have accents of their own. So they kind of pick up the accent, like the accentuation comes from the word before it, but it doesn't come over to the personal pronoun, but occasionally it does. And when it does, you can see that, for instance, emu, if you have that epsilon addition, it's going to have a circumflex accent. So you remember that we have grav, rising pitch. We have strong, rising pitch. We have grav, lowering or kind of falling pitch. And then we have the circumflex, which is then rising and then falling in one syllable, right? And then same thing with the dative, first person personal pronoun dative. You'll see the epsilon. It'll have a smooth breathing mark on it, and then an accent, strong accent over the epsilon. So these occasionally you'll see that, but the primary forms are the ones that you're going to see in the larger text on this page. So that's first person. Second person, second person personal pronoun. The singular is Sue. Altogether, Sue. You can notice the accent over the epsilon. All right. Second person personal pronoun genitive. Again, pronounced, even though it's a diphthong, it's pronounced the same way. So Sue, but no rising pitch on that. Of you, your, and second person personal pronoun dative, to or for you. soy, and second person personal pronoun, accusative, se. Yes. All right. All right. And I was just checking to make sure. You can see down there, it says the singular unemphatic forms have no accent. That means they're enclitics and are pronounced with the preceding word. And you can see those asterisks there. And then also with on the first person personal pronoun, you can see it with the genitive, the dative, and the accusative as well. So again, that just means no accent. Just know to recognize the forms, right? At this point, you're just trying to recognize what those forms are. Okay, so that's all the second person personal pronoun for the singular, and then for the plural, we'll go down the columns this time. So second person personal pronoun, nominative plural, who mace. Second person personal pronoun plural in the genitive is who moan. Okay. Second person personal pronoun in the dative plural, who min. And second person personal pronoun in the accusative plural. It's always it's a tongue twister for me. Who mas.
Like a moth.
Well, if that helps you remember, it is. Yeah, sure. I can tell you now. Okay. So we're not gonna draw on this too many times. I'm gonna let you guys work through some examples and translation, which I think is how you really fix it in memory. Third person personal pronoun. This now, again, the third person is a little bit different. Like as in English, we have gendered forms, right? So there's and actually this is also true in English, which is unusual, but we have in English masculine, feminine, and a neuter, right? He, she, it. Okay. So for the masculine, third person personal pronoun, masculine singular, autos. Third person personal pronoun, singular, and the genitive, autu. Third person personal pronoun, dative, singular, auto. Third person personal pronoun in the accusative singular, auton. Now, what do you notice so far before we go on? What do you notice about those endings? Does any of those endings look familiar to you?
First declension type style.
Yes. Second, close. Yeah, second declension. So they're like some of the declensions that you've already learned, right? So you'll see as we go through this too, that'll be true for those in the feminine and in the neuter form as well. Okay, third person personal pronoun, nominative plural, autoi. Okay, third person personal pronoun, genitive plural, auton. Third person personal pronoun in the dative plural, autois. Two or four of them, right? So the third person personal pronoun in the dative singular, masculine gender would be auto, and that's two or four, him. Okay. Third person personal pronoun, accusative plural, and the masculine gender, autus. Yes. Okay. And you can see here that there's some correspondence as well with some of the declensions you've already learned, right? And that makes it easier to learn these as well. All right. So moving on from the masculine of the third person personal pronoun now to the feminine of the third person personal pronoun. Third person personal pronoun, singular neuter, aute. Third person personal pronoun, feminine neuter, plural, autai. We'll keep moving horizontally this time. Third person personal pronoun, feminine genitive singular, autes. Third person personal pronoun, feminine genitive plural, auton. Okay. Third person personal pronoun, feminine dative, singular, aute. Okay. And notice the iota subscript under the eta. Remember the iota subscript? And notice the circumflex accent for both the genitive singular, the genitive plural, and then also for the dative singular and dative plural. All right. Okay. Third person personal pronoun, feminine dative plural, autais. Okay. Third person personal pronoun, feminine accusative singular, autain. Third person personal pronoun, feminine accusative plural, autas. There we go. So that would be them if you were, for instance, speaking to like a group of women, or you're talking about a group of feminine things, because remember in Greek, it's not just people that are gendered, right? Everything has a gender, an explicit gender in Greek. All right. Okay, and then finally, third person personal pronoun neuter. We'll go vertically this time, starting with all the singular examples in this chart. And so we'll start with the third person personal pronoun neuter singular, in the nominative case, auto. And since it's third person, which is and neuter, that would be translated as it. Third person personal pronoun neuter genitive singular, autu. Okay. Dative singular, auto. Accusative singular, third person personal pronoun neuter, auto. There we go. Yeah. Also would be translated as it. And then for the next column, we're looking again at third person personal pronoun. This would be the nominative neuter in the plural, auta. In the genitive plural, auton. There. In the dative plural, autois. To or for them, if you're talking about neuter objects, or there's no neuter people, so just, and actually in this case, just neuter objects, right? Or neuter things. And then third person personal pronoun in the accusative plural, auta. Them.
Another question, but I have to write it on the board.
Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah, go ahead. And then while Tommy's doing that, notice the correspondence here, right? So the nominative and the accusative singular forms have dropped the noon.
They might be in the cabinet if you're looking for.
So if you look at like where it says auto, remember when we studied the declensions for neuter nouns, and we saw, for instance, like a child would be heknon, right? So this is actually like that, except you've dropped the noon off. So that could be helpful as well. And remember, it was ta tekna. Remember that? So there we go. All right, let's see what we got here.
I think I spelled it wrong. What was the second accusative, and then the next category, the plural version of?
You have it right.
Yeah, that's good. So you're looking at the third person personal pronoun.
Was it a W? Or what?
Genitive plural.
What was it?
Omega.
Yes.
Okay, and you would accent it with the circumflex. And yeah, that's fine. And of course, this would be monumental epigraphy, like you see something on a column, or Greek manuscripts until about the 8th century.
Is it normal for
8th century AD.
English speakers like me to take this and be like, okay, AUTON, a ton. Like that's how I've been like getting by
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's fine. You just have to know that there's some false friends, right?
False
So,
friend.
yeah. So when you look at this is that's the capital letter, and that's or you could say actually the technical term is majuscule, and this is the minuscule. So most of it's actually the 9th century AD, I believe. This is when you start seeing most, actually I want to do that because
No, I don't know how it works for
most of the
everybody else,
manuscripts
but, like,
after that time actually have this sort of writing. But how do you pronounce this letter? What letter is it and how do you pronounce
it's
it?
an R, so row.
Yeah, it would be pronounced that way. So that's the only thing you have to be aware of, right? That, some of the letters don't correspond to English.
Like
but
the Omega. Looks like a W.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Says
So that my mind's still working that in my head. It's why I'm still slow. But like,
I mean, it can be helpful, but just with practice, you'll,
my mind
Yeah.
converts all the letters to
yeah,
English, and then that's how I get it.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
know.
And eventually, just over time,
Yeah.
it'll get there. So this would be using the minuscule, and I'm just using that because all the lexical study tools and all the versions that you're going to look at most likely are going to have minuscule.
Or am I doing what you're not supposed to be doing?
I would say, like, it's hard for me to say that's not what you're supposed to be doing. Like, if it's effective for you, like, or in the beginning, like, it helps you, then that's fine. The key is to keep reading, practicing, and writing, right? And eventually it'll just become like, it's almost like at this point, like for me, reading Greek letters is like reading English. Not Greek, reading Greek isn't always like reading English, but definitely reading Greek letters is like reading English. Like the sounds come to me very quickly, and they will too with you for time. It just takes a little bit.
It's like the longer you're in Mexico, the more C becomes less of a yes, and it just becomes C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just start to think of it as C. You don't think of it. You don't have to just mentally translate that.
And
That's
si
something.
entra means come inside my car, not the name of like a certain kind of Nissan car, Sentra. You guys know that?
That's funny.
Yeah, that causes a huge issue in Spanish speaking countries because of you've heard of this model car, right? Sentra.
Yeah.
But when you say that quickly, it sounds like siempre, like steal it.
Yeah. Come sit like that.
Yeah.
For some multilingual, they have like different persona for different languages.
Mm-hmm.
So like they speak French, they're like more mellow, and if they speak English, they're more like strong. So it's kind of like assigning a persona for different languages, so they can switch faster. That's how.
That's
it is.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like there's
Bipolar depends on which language you're speaking. You speak your personality.
well, there's all these, there's cadence, there's volume, there's all sorts of polite expression that you have across languages that sometimes can differ based on that.
Yes.
The language. The other one, by the way, is like there's a Chevy model called Nova, which if you know Spanish means, it doesn't go. Nova. And that was actually kind of true of the Chevy Nova. It was like really that model car.
What's the native language for the country, Jordan?
Arabic. So you would speak Fusha or classical or modern standard Arabic, which is basically classical Arabic. With
You know it quite well.
I know it's some, and then there's the vernacular, which would be, they call it the Amiya, which is just like the street, so these are two different registers of the language. Yeah. All right. Let's keep going. Well, that didn't come out very good. We actually already talked about the emphatic pronoun. The only thing, let me see if it has some notes in here. All right. So you'll see this when you do the reading in the chapter, if you haven't already, the pronouns themselves sometimes have emphatic forms, like where you have the epsilon in front of them, if, for certain cases. They also, and you'll see this. We'll talk about it a little bit. Like there's also some nuance to this. So, for instance, I'll say this now in case I forget to say it when we move on to the other uses of the pronoun, which we're going to get into here. Sometimes with certain verbs, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an emphasis. So we're going to get into this now, but you'll see that like autos, it's not strictly needed, right? Because the person and the number of that referent is already expressed by the grammar of the verb, right? So we said, remember, blepo, first person common singular, that it has to, that if you're to express the personal pronoun, it would have to be ego, right? First person common singular pronoun, ego, all right? You just assume it. Now, there are some verbs there like emit where that's not quite true. So occasionally you'll see ego emit, and you'll want to reserve judgment about whether that's intending to be emphatic or not. You might have to look at some other markers in the context. But generally speaking, when you see a substantive, right? When you see a pronoun that is functioning that way, then it generally is either intensive and emphatic, or in some cases a reflexive. But it generally carries emphasis. All right. So let's keep going and maybe talk through a few examples. So, not to cover, we covered this ground, but the singular unemphatic, or the, forms that lack the enclitic, we're talking about the enclitic, it has no accent, they're pronounced with the preceding word. So it's ho pater mu, which means,
How do you say that word again?
ho pater mu. Sorry, it got cut off down here. This is supposed to be a mu. Down here, it's supposed to be this. In some circumstances, though, the previous word will take on an accent. So the way you're pronouncing this is ho pater mu, and there's no accent over the diphthong here. Now, occasionally that does change. So here, remember, onoma normally would not have an accent over the last syllable. It would just be to onoma. But because of the presence of that pronoun, it causes an accent to carry over to the last syllable of the previous noun. So you'll see that. It's just, don't be thrown by it. It's pretty easy to identify it when you see it. And that happens pretty frequently, where you have, and there are some rules for it. I'm not 100% sure, because sometimes, you'll see it enough times and you think you know the rule, but you notice that there's 3 syllables here. And then if you add mu here, because it's enclitic and it doesn't have an accent, now you would have 1, 2, 3 more syllables after the first one that don't have an accent over it, and Greek doesn't like that. So you can't have 3 syllables in a row in Greek, and I'm like 95% sure this is an absolute rule.
No more than 3 without an accent.
Without an accent, yeah. So that's why the accent carries over there. You don't need to know that, but just for your information. Okay, personal pronouns. I've been kind of getting ahead of myself this whole time as we've been going through this. So again, oftentimes in Greek, what you find, what linguists call the marked form, The marked form you can think of it as the predominant form. The marked form in Greek for a sentence that has a subject that in English would be a pronoun is what we would call a null subject. And so here, if you look at this example, you guys remember the example or the verb echo, which means to hold, or in some cases to have, right? And you'll remember daimonion, it means a demon, right? But notice here, it's not autos daimonion eche, right? It's daimonion eche, right? And so it's a null subject, and that's typical for Greek. So, Greek verbs include the subject information. So in the nominative case, those pronouns are not needed. It's a fair conclusion, though, then when you do see them, if you see the subject of a pronominal pronoun, a subject pronoun, you can say that it's communicating emphasis.
It's because the word demon is because that's the first word. Are they emphasizing more emphasis into demon?
Oh, great question. I'm glad you asked that. I think we talked about this very briefly in the first quarter. Greek word order is much more flexible. To answer your question in very basic terms, when you have simple sentences like this, you cannot conclude that if something, one element of the grammar, the syntax occurs earlier, that it necessarily means emphasis. So here it's not a demon, he's got a demon, the emphasis is not on having a demon. Now, when you read in the text, and maybe it's in the notes here or in the presentation, but there are the more complex the sentence gets, the more the front loading of that information suggests emphasis. And so one of the examples was, I believe it's 1 John chapter 1, the opening of 1 John, that which, or who, the one whom we have seen and handled, that because there's multiple stacked relative clauses at the beginning of the sentence, that does indicate emphasis, because that's an unusual construction. But for very simple sentences like this, that eche daimonion and daimonion eche are essentially the same. There is somewhat of a tendency in Greek that you go subject, object, verb versus English subject, verb, object. He hits the ball, but for simple sentences, it's not necessarily emphatic. Yeah, so that's good. All right. Now, I said that when you add a pronoun, it generally means that there's emphasis. Now, sometimes it could just be clarity. So this is kind of one of the sort of sub examples, if you will. So here would be what you might consider, you might translate this in English with a reflexive pronoun. He himself. So here it's autos eipin, makarion estin malon didonai e lambaning. He himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And that's a quote from the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians. And it's like, yes, it was Jesus himself, right? So it's clarifying. You could say that it shades to intensive meaning, but really it's clarifying, right? And that's why the subject is made explicit, because Paul is relating his own exposition to the Corinthians, and then he injects this quotation, right, from Jesus. So it was Jesus himself who said this, not just myself, right? Here's another example. Ego abaptisa humas hudati autos de baptise humas and pneumati hagio. I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you in the Holy Spirit. So here it's a contrast or an emphasis, right? Oftentimes we do the same thing with the reflexive in English as well. So I myself have baptized you with water. That might be one way to translate this, and that would be a perfectly valid way to do that. All right, the intensive case, which is a wrinkle. So when you have the pronoun that matches the substantive. Remember, the substantive is a noun or anything else that functions as a subject of a sentence. And when the pronoun matches the intensified substantive in gender, case, and numbers, it's always anarthrous, so it just doesn't have an article. So it's not ho autos ho kurios, it's autos ho kurios katabesetai, the Lord himself. The Lord himself will descend. Autos ho kurios, himself, the Lord, right? I'm being overly literal, right? But you following me? So this would be this intensive use case. And it's different from the emphatic because there is already a subject there. You see that? There's a subject that's explicit. It's not autos katabesetai, which would be he himself descends, right? It is autos hokurios, or it could potentially be hokurios hu autos katabesetai. You'll see, we'll talk about that, but it's the Lord himself, or overly literal, himself, the Lord will descend, right? All right. You can also use autos to intensify these first or second person personal pronouns in the nominative case. And, here's an example. I think that's also drawn from 1 Corinthians, pepoita de enkurio hote kai autos tacheos eleusomai. I am confident in the Lord, I trust in the Lord. Remember, peitho, the verb. I think that was one of your vocabulary items, wasn't it, from the first quarter? You'll learn that this is the perfect form of this, but you don't need to worry about that right now. I trust, or I am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon, right? So it's not, do you see the shade of difference between like a clarifying use case versus the intensive, in the sense that Paul isn't like trying to clarify like I myself versus Titus or Timothy or somebody else, but I myself will come, right? So there's that intensifying element versus when Paul introduced the quotation, right? What would we say? Direct speech. He's actually taking a quotation from Jesus. It was Jesus himself who said this, right? So it's actually more of a clarifying nuance. Make sense, Tommy? Okay. Oh, and then there's the identical use. So when the article precedes a form of the pronoun autos, it should be translated the same. This was very important. This is where first-year Greek students typically go awry, and it actually took me quite a while to get this one, straight in my head. So here we have ektu autu stomatos exerketai eulogia kai katara. Can you see my little mouse cursor there? Okay, I'm just checking. Out of, let's skip this for a second, mouth, right? Stomatos, because here we are looking at genitive, right? So we're looking at this singular genitive, so it's stomatos, and then exergetai goes out. You can see the prefix preposition there, right, which was ek, and then it undergoes pronunciation shift, and so ek becomes ex. Exergetai goes out. Eulogia, which means blessing, and katara, which means cursing, right? So out of his mouth goes blessing and cursing? No, out of the same mouth, right? So this is from the Epistle of James, and he's talking about how it seems so ironic that you have people who can bless one moment and then curse the next, right? And it says, out of the same mouth comes blessing and cursing.
How do you say the middle word again with the epsilon and the X and the epsilon?
Exergetai.
X-air.
We can all say it together. Exergetai.
X-air.
Exergetai.
And it's in the imperfect tense.
That would be in, that would actually be no, that would be present. That would be present. I was just checking to see if there's any, there's no stem change. Sometimes you'll see stem changes. So when we get to aorist verbs, you're going to want to look for stem changes. And there's two different types of stem changes. There's a first aorist and second aorist. And it's not, when we get there, it'll seem more complicated than it really is. But you know, that's a clue when you see a stem change that you're dealing with an aorist. But here, remember the root, the lexical form was erchomai, right? And the third person singular ending was etai, right?
I couldn't tell what the stem was versus the augmentation that happens when some verbs.
Yeah, so here it's actually not an augment, it's actually a prefixed, prepositionally prefixed verb. So it's in the, for instance, a similar word would be ekporiomai, which means to go out, but it would be a kappa. But here, because you have, remember you don't need to remember, just be able to recognize it. But the rule is because you have a noun, you have a vowel epsilon here, which is the first letter of the root. When you add a prefix preposition that ends in a kappa, it's going to lengthen or it's going to shift to become xi, right? So it's not ek ergatai, it's ex ergatai.
So it's basically a compound word. It's functioning as two words smushed into one.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not augmented, it's two separate words.
That's right. So the way that you create compound verbs in Greek is by prepositional prefixing. You know, so I'm not aware of any other verbs in Greek that are compounded in any other way. It's always a base verb with a preposition that's added to it, to the beginning of it. Yeah.
So if you were being super literal, you could translate this like out from the same mouth, comes out, or goes out, or
So the egg was out.
ek is all it's the same word as at the beginning. It's out again.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So
Out comes blessing and cursing.
and that's a common pattern. And I think we might have touched on that at the end of the last quarter, but that's called reduplication. And you'll find that frequently in Greek, where the action of the verb is expressed by compounding with a preposition, but then you'll also see the preposition used in a prepositional phrase that modifies it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna have to really review chapter 7 because I read it last night and I was like, I don't remember any of this.
Yeah.
7.
Okay.
What was 7?
The augmentation
Oh,
and the 3 different types of augmentation, like the epsilon, alpha. I'm just like, oh my
Oh,
gosh.
the
Yeah.
contract verbs.
The contract verbs, sorry, contract verbs.
which is what this is.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember with like those augments, like with experience, you'll generally learn to recognize them quickly. What you really need to know are those paradigm charts. So definitely for every declension of the noun and for all the verb conjugations that we've learned, right? So, you know, for instance, we learned the present, we learned the imperfect. So for instance, for ame, that is irregular. Make sure that you know those because they're so foundational and they occur so frequently. And then with the augments, I know it got kind of complicated there towards the end with lots of different charts and some rules and stuff. Over time, you'll learn to recognize those patterns, and but the most important thing is just to know those, all the different like declensions and all the conjugations. So search for those, write those out a few times before next week. All right, let's talk about relative pronouns. And I might need to start moving a little faster just for this week, because going to need to attend to some other matters. But relative pronouns, so in English, who, which, that, whose, whom. It's all those WH words, right? And the relative pronoun introduces a dependent clause. So Bill is the man who lives next to me. Bill is the man whom I would like to get to know, right? Bill is the man whose golf clubs I've borrowed, right? All right. So there is some inflection in English as well. The relative pronoun who, you can think of it as expanding or giving more information about the noun man, which is its antecedent. All right. We're helped here because the forms are similar to the first and second declension endings. So let's just move on ahead past these misshaped graphics here, and just go right to the charts here. So relative pronoun masculine, hosts would be the masculine singular. You'll also see the form hostis, and that comes from adding the enclitic tis. If you remember, tis meant anyone. If you remember that from the first quarter, tis meant anyone. But what I have to tell you is that by the time you get to Koine Greek, oftentimes hosts and hostis are difficult to distinguish in meaning. And meaning, so it's just, this is the man who, right? So masculine singular would be, anthropos or aner. I don't know if that was part of your vocabulary. That means man specifically. Anthropos sometimes can have a sense more closer like person. But if it's in the subject of the sentence, the man who knows John, right? This is the singular here, relative pronoun that you're going to use, masculine. Oh, let's go through the paradigm together. So good news again is that many of these forms are familiar. So relative pronoun masculine, nominative singular hosts or hostis, genitive is who. Relative pronoun in the masculine dative, ho. Notice the rough breathing mark and the circumflex over it, which you've seen in dative forms. And then the relative pronoun, the masculine accusative, hon, with the rough breathing mark and the strong accent mark. Okay. Relative pronoun masculine in the nominative plural, hoi, with a rough breathing mark and a strong accent, or hoitines, because if you'll remember how T it was in the nominative singular, it was tis. In the the nominative plural, it was tines. And so you'll see that here reflected as well. And likewise, sometimes there doesn't seem to be any real difference in the meaning between hoi and hoitines. All right. And then relative pronoun, the masculine plural, hon, with the rough breathing mark. So we aspirate it. And then the relative pronoun in the masculine dative plural, hois, and accusative hus. Yeah, there we go. The feminine, you'll start to see some familiar forms as well for the relative pronoun. So singular, nominative, hey, or also heitis. And then Hace is the genitive singular. Genitive dative for the relative feminine pronoun, hey. Relative pronoun, accusative feminine singular, hain. Okay, relative pronoun, nominative plural feminine, hi. Genitive plural, hon. Genitive dative, heis. And the relative pronoun, accusative feminine plural, has. There you go. Mhm. And then finally the neuter. So relative pronoun, the singular neuter, ho. Relative, and remember that you see this kind of pattern continuing with a noon. It's like many of the neuter nouns, those endings, but without the noon at the end. And then the relative pronoun neuter genitive singular, who. And relative pronoun dative neuter singular, ho. Okay. Relative pronoun accusative neuter singular, also ho. Okay. And then neuter plural, ha. Genitive plural, hon. Dative plural, hois. Accusative plural, ha.
So it's like putting an H before every single one and then.
Good observation. So yes, these are all these all have the rough breathing mark, and that's helpful. Yeah. So all these relative pronouns, you can see they have the rough breathing marks in them. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. So, as we said, relative pronouns introduce dependent clauses. And an independent clause stands by itself grammatically. So it could be a sentence on its own. A dependent clause forms a function within a sentence in the syntax of that sentence. So men were bringing on a bed a man, anthropon, who was a paralytic, right? Hos, who was a paralytic. And then that pronoun hos, the relative pronoun, is going to agree with the antecedent in gender and number, but not in case. So that's important because it has its own case. So you see, anthropon is in the it's in the accusative, right? So you would think, okay, well, maybe the relative pronoun would also be an accusative, but no, because the relative pronoun is going to carry the case that it has inside of the dependent clause, right? So inside of the dependent clause, you can almost look at it as the man was a paralytic. Who was a paralytic, right? All right. Relative pronoun use. Just a few more examples. So this is it's like one of those games you play where they take letters out of the word, see if you can still recognize it. So I think what this is trying to say is meson e tu patros Avraham hostis. I don't know what this is here. Hostis apethenon. So you are not greater than. So that's what that's the function there of the genitive. Than our Father. Here, I think that's supposed to say. Yeah. Who died? Who moan is really what's supposed to be in there, and I know it just got mangled. Sorry about that. But anyways, what we're supposed to be looking at here is this, and that should be hostis. Sorry, I apologize about that. So So in this sentence, you are not greater than our father Abraham, who died, right? So its function here is, you can think of it as being a nominative, because if you look at the English, who died, you could substitute it with Abraham, right? Abraham died. So that might be helpful.
How do you say that last word in Greek?
Apethanen, or apethanen. Yeah, or you could say apethanen, sort of the modified erasmian that we talked about. All right. Relative pronoun use. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, that did not come over. When I downloaded this, it just did not come over right. Let me actually, give me 1 second, because I'm gonna send this out to you, but before I do that, I'm gonna look here and see if I wanted to see if I had this in the Google presentation style, which I don't. So let me. Okay. So for right now, we're just going to skip past this, just because this is not looking good. Look in your text for the examples that Merkel and Plummer, they'll have examples and in the exercises for each of these. And then if you have any questions about it, just let me know. So yeah, that didn't come across very good either. Jesu hostu. Yeah. That's really weird. I don't even know what's going on right here. Okay.
It's like it's repeating whatever's the red is covering up or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that just didn't come across right at all.
There might have been like a text animation. It just
Right, it's supposed
screenshotted.
to pop over it or something like.
Yeah.
All right. So hang on, because this is actually distracting enough now that I'm going to. I'm going to share this directly from the presentation. All right, can you see the whole? Can you see the whole screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just do this. Oh, even this has some issues in it. Oh, okay. Yeah, because it had a bunch of animation in there. So again, Mesu meson etu patros hemon Avraham hostis apetanon. So Abraham who died. Okay. So nominative singular. Nominative masculine singular hostis. All right, here we go. That's better. Entis bis basilikos hu hoquios estene. Well, oh yeah. So who here means who, so that's going to be in the genitive case. So that's a genitive singular. And monosophoteo dia Jesu Christu ho he doxa es tus ionas. Okay, so glory be to the only God through Jesus Christ. To whom, because this is dative, right? Be the glory forever. So dative singular there. And you can see here that because that's in a masculine form, that doesn't look good. It must be referring back to God here, you know. And this is just in a positive. It's like a, you know, parenthesis a little bit. Glory be to the only God through Jesus Christ, right? But it's the God. You could remove this part right here, and it would just be to the only wise God. Whoops. Whoops. Oh my goodness. Yeah. To the only wise God, to whom be the glory forever, right? All right. And then accusative. They believed. So epistioson te grape kai to lago hon apen ho Jesus. So they believed the word, they believed the writings and the writing and the word which was spoken by Jesus, you know, the scripture or the word.
Isn't that in Luke 24?
That would be in the scripture. Yes, that would be in Luke. So here, so they believed the scripture and the word which was spoken by Jesus, or which Jesus spoke. All right. And here you can see in the sentence te grape kai to logo, even though they have the dative form, you'll remember that there's some verbs that take a dative form, right, for their object. So the object is the scripture and the word. Right here, it's a compound object. It's taken together as one, right? So even though it's two different things, the technical term is henditis, you know, two different things, but they're looked at it like they're just one thing, you know, like a couple of people, right? And that's why here you say hon, that's the relative pronoun in the accusative, which was spoken by Jesus, right? So sometimes you'll look at these, you know, the main thing is you just need to be able to recognize the relative pronoun. Sometimes you may need to noodle a little bit over why it's declined the way that it is. But you should just be able to get the sense by looking at the context of it. All right. Relative pronoun with no antecedent, and then you have to supply the pronoun. So Hoskar eche doptesetai auto. And that is who has, for who has, to him shall be given. All right. And you can see that there is no explicit subject, right? It doesn't say autos here or anything. For he who has, it will be given to him. And so when you translate it, sometimes you need to smooth it out and supply the subject there. Oh, see, and I didn't realize this is in the notes here, but you notice I mentioned that occasionally the referent is expressed after the relative pronoun, and that makes it a postcedent. But you don't hear people say that very much. You talk about an anaphoric use and a cataphoric use. The anaphoric use is the normal way you think about it, where you have a pronoun that refers to a noun that came before it, but then there's also a cataphoric use, where the pronoun comes first and then the noun comes. All right. All right. This is a little wrinkle. And again, like I said, you're going to have to noodle a little bit sometimes. Memorize, become familiar with the relative pronoun forms, but don't struggle too much in the beginning with how those relative pronouns are declined, because occasionally there is something called attraction, where that relative pronoun will take on the case of the antecedent. So here's an example. Me manoyute tu logu hu ego epon hu min. So remember the word which I spoke to you. Okay, from me manayuo, I remember. And then remember that certain verbs, again, a little bit of review here, right? Certain verbs take on a dative, and some verbs take on a genitive for the to signal the direct objects. So me manayuo takes here a genitive. So remember the word, and then if we were doing this it's not true to say it this way, but the pristine way, right? The correct way, but you would think that this would not be who, but hos, right? Because it'd be the word which I spoke to you. I spoke, or let's see, ego epon. Oh, it would be hon, because I spoke the word, right? The word is the object. The word is the object. So you would expect that the relative pronoun here would be hon, because logos is a masculine noun, right? So the relative pronoun, masculine, singular, right? In the accusative should be omicron, rough breathing mark, strong accent, new, hon. But instead what we have, and this is what they call attraction, is instead you have the genitive form there, right? Okay. And then like everything, sometimes the hardest ones and the ones you're most likely to confuse are some of like the relative pronouns, so and then the articles, right? So those oftentimes they'll look very similar, but then also different conjugations of the copulative, remember, is ame, I am, and so sometimes they will look very similar, but most of the time it'll be clear in context what it is, because it can only be one thing. So even if you forget that, the rough breathing mark, yeah, that's got to be the relative pronoun, or, it's here, there's a smooth breathing mark, so that's got to be the, feminine singular, you'll know, because it's the only thing that'll fit. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys go through the vocabulary just this week. So go through that on your own and write that out and get familiar with it. Come up with some examples that'll help you remember it, and some